I don't know about you students, but when I need to get pumped up, I listen to Antonio Vivaldi. Let's quickly talk about digital camera modes, all right? So obviously, not all of you have this dial on the device or camera that you're using. It might be your phone. But if you go into the settings on whatever photography device you happen to be using for this class, chances are you're going to find these settings right here. Okay, and if you can't find them, what do? Go to your Play Store, go to Google Play or iTunes and look up camera mode apps and see if you can get an app installed on your phone that'll give you some flexibility to work with. All right. Manual, aperture, shutter speed priority. If you've got these manual settings, cool. Let me tell you, try the aperture priority out in a number of different settings and see what happens under different lighting conditions, different types of setups like a portrait, do a close-up portrait of somebody, do a landscape shot where you've got depth of field. See what happens when you play around with that aperture. Start at a small aperture and increase it and make it larger, and then look at your pictures and see what results you got. Make sure you take notes so you know what you were doing. Same thing with shutter speed. Start with a fast shutter speed and work your way down to a slow shutter speed. It's a science, okay? There is nothing automatic about photography. It is a science, okay? So let me just run through these, okay? Automatic, all right. Obviously, it's a lot easier just to shoot in auto, okay? Even when it's set to auto, remember that you still have to hold your shutter button down, you know, halfway, give it a chance to focus because it's going to automatically focus itself, and then finish pressing down the shutter to take your shot, okay? So this means no flash. I personally am not a fan of using flash indoors, okay? I'm not a fan of flash really outdoors at night either. All it does is just illuminate things in a really fake looking way. It's blown out looking, and I don't care for it. I'd much rather go down here and use the night setting for shooting portraits in low light. What this night setting does is it makes your camera more sensitive to light. So even though there isn't a lot of light available, your camera is more sensitive, so it's picking up on it more. And it just gives you a warmer picture than if you're shooting with that flash. It just whites out everything, okay? Time to use the flash. You probably saw that in the shooting sunsets video in Project 3. When you are shooting a sunset, for example, if you have a person standing in front that you want to take a portrait of with the sunset in the background, the person is basically going to be a silhouette, right? Because your camera is adjusting for that sunset in the background and just kind of, it can't do both at the same time. It can't adjust and focus for the foreground and the background all at one time. It's not that smart. So you turn your flash on, and the flash illuminates your person who's in the foreground, and your camera takes what's in the background. So that's the way to trick your camera, okay? That's pretty much the only time I use flash. Portrait mode, okay? Remember those bokeh pictures? A bokeh is essentially a nice portrait mode where you're getting up close to your subject and you've got something in the distance. It can't be right behind your subject it'll be sharp just like your subject. Your camera, like I said, it's not that smart, okay? It only knows how to focus on one thing at a time. So if you've got everything in the foreground, it's going to focus on everything in the foreground, which is why when you're using that portrait mode, if you just have your subject in the foreground and then you've got whatever in the background, those pretty autumn leaves, they've got to be far off in the distance, okay? They can't be right next to your subject. Or those Christmas lights. that are hanging off in the distance. You've got to have them far enough away that the camera doesn't recognize them, and so they turn out blurry, okay? So bokeh, yeah, I love bokeh. Next, landscape. Okay, so when you're doing a landscape, I see a lot of people shooting landscapes with like they've got their cars and their houses, and there's a mountain far off in the distance, and they're taking a picture of that mountain, but it's like, I don't really consider that a landscape. You're taking a picture of your car and your house to me. That's in the foreground, that's the subject of the picture. The mountain just happens to be in the background. A landscape is when you go out with the intention of shooting an entire field, an entire range of land, okay? And you want the entire field to be sharp. That's depth of field. That that setting will give you the ability to have a sharp depth of field all the way out there, to the back where your mountain is, from the blades of grass right in front of you to the wheat field halfway out, and then the trees in the distance. Everything is sharp. That's what landscape does. Macro. Look at how many of you guys like to take close-up pictures of flowers. That's what macro, that's why there is a flower right there, because technically that's usually what people are doing with macro. They're getting up close to plants and things, and they look really close. They look cool close up, right? And they look awesome when you blow them up. So you've got to make sure that you've got your camera settings to do macro beefed up. So you've got your, for example, your file size set to like 3 megabytes, or your resolution set to 300 pixels per inch, something like that, where you're going to get a lot of pixels in your shot. You can only get so close to your subject before your camera can't focus anymore and it gets blurry, right? So if you're getting really close and it's blurry, back off, okay? So just back up however many inches you need to back up before you can get your subject sharp. Okay, it's better to take a picture from a little further away and get a really nice crisp shot with your file size higher or your resolution higher, because you're going to import it to GIMP and crop it, and then you can get those close-up details that you want. But if your image is blurry to begin with, you've got nothing. Doesn't matter how much you crop it. Okay, so make sure that if you're doing close-ups, you don't get so close that you're actually taking a blurry picture. Okay. Motion, this is your sports shot. This is where you get that very high shutter speed so that you're capturing the instantaneous moment, trying to get rid of the blur, okay? If you have a cheap camera phone, set it to sports. I've got mine set to sports all the time. That way my shutter speed is quicker, and my phone has a tendency to take better pictures, because what happens with my phone? I'm standing there, I'm like holding my breath, which is a good technique if you're trying to keep your camera stills. Take a deep breath and hold your breath. I can do that. I can do that all day long, and I still get blurry pictures. It's ridiculous. It's like this camera is just lame. So I have it set to sports. I get more sharp pictures when I have it set on sports. Okay. And we talked about night already. So also light painting. Okay. When this says night, it says low light. It doesn't say no light, right? Low light. So this is probably going to be like your sunsets, your sunrises. Okay. Something in low light, or your indoor photography, okay, when you're shooting inside. So light painting. I mean, you can try this night setting and see if you can get any light painting. I'm not sure how many seconds that's going to stay open, or if it's even going to stay open for a whole second. I don't know. But get on your Play Store and look for a long exposure app, okay? Long exposure is going to open up your shutter for however many seconds you set it to. So you just open up that program, maybe tell it you want it to stay open for 2 seconds, go outside where it's pitch black, get your sparklers, your glow sticks, your flashlights, get a whole bunch of them. Like, it turns out really cool if you get a whole bunch of different colored things and you've got people out there spinning it all around and stuff, and everybody's having a ball. And you want to set your camera up, remember, on a tripod or something like that. Or you can also have your subject stay still. Like if your subject is a red glow in the dark ninja. I don't know, but you know what I'm saying? Instead of having the subject move, you can just take your camera and move your camera around, and that'll create the blur. So you can play around with both of those things. Okay.